You're listening to You're on Mute, a Pexip podcast. Each episode will feature different guests from within the technology industry and get their take on how video conferencing is transforming the way companies are doing business and also what it's like to partner with Pexip along the way. I'm your host, Justin Longo, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kyle Forney. Kyle has a lifelong passion for video as a means of both entertainment and communication. As a college art student, Kyle had an identity crisis that led him to put down the oil pastels and pursue his true calling in media communication and technology. As for me, I'm a lot of things. A bowler, a terrible golfer, a pizza man, a fisherman, but a podcaster? I've never been that. I have a hard time hooking up an Xbox, but somehow I'm here, and I fell in love with my career in technology. Sorry, what's that, Kyle? Kyle, can you repeat that? I didn't hear you. I think you're on mute. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk About It, a Pexip podcast. You are listening to the first episode. My name is Justin Longo. I am a channel sales manager here at Pexip. I am joined by my co-host, Kyle Forney. Kyle Forney is our Director of Solutions Architects.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here, Justin. This is an exciting day. Certainly does feel like the first day of school on this, but I've got a brand new microphone and I'm on my brand new Pexip session here. So definitely looking forward to how this goes.
Yeah, for sure. And when I first started at Pexip about 4 months ago, I came in with this idea that I wanted to do a podcast. So I spoke to my boss about it and I was excited about the opportunity, but frankly, I didn't know what I wanted the podcast to be about. I didn't know if I wanted to host it myself or if I wanted to have a co-host. So we spoke about it for about a week and we decided, it'd be really cool if we had two completely different personalities on the show. So there's me. I am a pizza man turned channel sales manager. I fell kind of backwards into the IT business about 7 years ago. I was plucked out of a pizza shop. I had been doing that pretty much since I graduated college. I am not a technical person. If you ask me to plug in your cable or get your internet working for you, that's not something that I could help you with. But for whatever reason, I just fell in love with this business. And I thought that it would be really cool if we had somebody who is the total opposite end of the spectrum of me, just to kind of go back and forth with. Kyle is super technical. He's one of the brilliant minds in our industry. He's been around this for a long time, and he really knows the ins and outs of what we do. So it'll be nice to kind of go back and forth with Kyle and talk about it, really. So the premise for this podcast, kind of after all the conversations were over, was we wanted to really highlight our channel program and how we work with our partners, as well as give our partners a platform to tell the story of what it is that they do and how they help their customers achieve, the technology goals that they have set for themselves. So on today's podcast, we have Dan Klanderman. Dan is the Director of Collaboration for Ironbow. And then we also have John Horne. John is one of the account executives on the Pexip team. So the way that we're going to do this moving forward is Kyle and I are going to be here as your host and co-host. We will have someone from the Pexip team as well, probably a sales rep or a solutions architect on. And then we'll also have a partner on to interview as well. And what we want to do is highlight that partner win that we've had jointly with Pexip. So today we're going to be talking about the United States Coast Guard and how Ironbow helped deliver a solution to them. And moving forward, who knows what we're going to talk about. It's going to be kind of a hodgepodge of different things, and we hope you're all here for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. I mean, I would say, the way that I sort of look at this is, yes, this is Pexip sponsored. Yes, it does have our logo kind of within frame here. But our promise to the listeners is that we will not make this a 1 hour long, advertisement for Pexip. Completely promise you all that. And I think mostly what I'm looking forward to here is we are going to have a chance to sort of talk about something that's kind of blown up within the last year, and that is video. Obviously, for maybe not necessarily the right reasons, everybody is using video in everyday life right now. And I think that it's, obviously we can, get really used to using that for our jobs and our 9 to 5. And yes, people sometimes get tired of being on video sessions every day. And sometimes we can kind of lose sight of the fact that video really truly does help people. It can solve crazy problems within this industry. And, certainly this podcast is going to help us kind of walk through some of those areas as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to have those conversations too. So without further ado, Justin, should we go ahead and bring on our first guest here, and John?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go ahead and we're going to bring in John Horne right now. Mr. Horne, how are you, sir?
Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Very good. Very good.
I was enjoying
John,
my time in your virtual green room.
Yes, thanks very much for that. I definitely branded that for your benefit. Wanted to make you feel like you were in the studio with us. So
well, thank you for stocking the refrigerator with tons of Zima. It was awesome.
You bet.
It's very 1996 of you.
Oh yeah, that's where I live.
So John, welcome. You have the distinct honor of being our very first podcast guest.
No pressure, right? Well, I think the saving grace here is that we've got a great use case to talk about, and an excellent customer, and definitely a use case that illustrates our relationship with our partners. So I'm very excited to have this discussion with you.
Can you, before we jump into the use case, can you just talk a little bit about your background and how you end up in the video conferencing space, and ultimately how you got here today?
Wow. Okay. No, I've been in federal sales for a long time. Really enjoyed my time in federal sales. I started out with Tandberg. I was there for 10 years, and then Tandberg got acquired by Cisco. Figured I would maybe stay there for 3. Ended up staying there for 8 years as a federal sales account manager, and then made my way to Pexip in 2019. So I've seen a lot of familiar faces along the way. Maybe folks that I didn't see in the 8 years I was working at Cisco, I saw again when I came back to Pexip. So everything that goes around comes around. We've all maintained fantastic working relationships together, and it's been great with working with a lot of video focused partners the past couple of years.
Yeah, and Kyle and I were talking about this as we were doing the prep for the podcast, and I was saying that a lot of the times I, as a total civilian, unexperienced in federal sales, I have a hard time differentiating between the National Guard and the Coast Guard. So if you could you just give us a little bit of background about the Coast Guard and how they differentiate from the Navy?
Well, let's talk about the Coast Guard. As you would expect, they're patrolling the 95,000 miles of U.S. coastline. But the interesting thing about them is they don't wear just one hat. They really serve a lot of roles, the men and women that serve in the Coast Guard. So obviously they're part of armed forces. They participate as first responders as well. First responders being folks, everything from your local police to FEMA to, expanding out to local government to federal government. They're part of that group as well. The Coast Guard is also part of law enforcement and the intelligence community as well. And then, probably what they're known for the most is saving lives. I can remember as a kid, and I'll probably date myself here, growing up in the 70s, seeing a whole bunch of commercials that would run on TV that always had the motto, "Be prepared." And so their motto now is Semper Paratus, which is always ready. If you want to go down a rat hole on YouTube, go and look at the history of Coast Guard commercials, recruiting commercials. It's very interesting how it's changed over time. But yeah, their mission is paramount. They're protecting the U.S. coast. They're coordinating with law enforcement folks everywhere, and really a key, very important mission, the Coast Guard.
Actually, kind of an interesting story about the Coast Guard. Probably about a month and a half ago, I was down where I currently live in Savannah, Georgia. I was on the beach in Tybee Island. And pretty close to the end of Tybee Island, there is an inlet where, most of the Coast Guard is based around this area. Probably about 8 or so miles offshore, there was a boat that was on fire. And you look left and you just see two Coast Guard ships flying out of the inlet. And you're like, you know what, it's nice to know that when you're out at sea or whatever, fishing, whatever the case may be, that the Coast Guard's kind of there to protect. And it's not only, hey, where's your fishing license? It's also, we got your back when your boat's ready to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, my mental picture of the Coast Guard is, really not just a classic Coast Guard cutter, but, a helicopter coming in, maybe lowering a ladder down and picking somebody up off of a boat. They get to use a lot of nice toys and, participate in missions of all types. And that's what I think is most exciting about them. And when, we heard there was an opportunity to help them solve a problem, specifically one that was going to take care of the people that are serving in the Coast Guard. It really felt exciting to be able to tackle that and come up with a solution.
So how did you end up getting involved with the Coast Guard, and how did you end up hearing about the solution that they needed?
Yeah, so when you're talking about federal solicitations, they usually go through a couple of cycles. There may be, requests for information where a government agency or government group is just, saying, hey, what's out there on the market? What's available with COTS or commercial off-the-shelf items? How can we build something out? Here's our vision, right? Here's the number of people that we want to serve. Here's the features and functions. Here's the security requirements. And then they'll, come back around and go for an RFQ or request for quotation. So, the federal, fiscal cycle kind of ends in September. So I think it was sometime around July or August, that we saw an RFQ come out. And by we, I mean, Pexip and Ironbow. Sometimes we know this stuff is going to come out, and generally we see it at the same time when these solicitations do come out. And so it'll go something like, maybe I'll call up my buddy. Let's just pick a random name, Dan Klanderman. Let's say I call up Dan Klanderman over at Ironbow and go, hey, Dan, did you see this thing with the Coast Guard? And he'll say something like, yeah, but I haven't had time to read it yet, and let's set up a meeting, let's set up a call, and have the discussion. So yeah, that's usually what happens. We kind of see it at the same time, and kind of the wheels start turning and figure out, how are we going to meet this requirement? And so that's how we became aware of that.
I see Dan has joined us. Welcome aboard, sir. It's nice to meet you.
Thanks. Nice to meet you too. Good to see you guys again.
Good to see you, Dan. Somehow all this time that we've known each other, I knew one day we might end up doing a podcast together, and today was that day.
Did we even know what a podcast was back then, John?
No, and it doesn't even live on pods anymore. But yeah, no, I kind of feel like the opening band. I'm opening for the Dan Klanderman band. But yeah, no, a great use case to discuss on your inaugural episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this was one of the first ones, I think, when we were, sort of planning this out, sort of current trends in the market with telehealth kind of being kind of a key piece of what's been going on within the last year. And then a brand new podcast. There's been a lot of stuff kind of going on. I said, you know what? I think I know what the first subject should be. I thought, who has the greatest voice for podcasting out of all of our partners? Dan Klanderman is where we landed on that, and so we are very, very happy to welcome you onto this first show, Dan. So thanks for being here.
Thanks. I'm really excited. I think this will be the first podcast I've ever participated in. I consume a lot of podcasts. I think there's a lot of really good ones out there, but I've never really, tried to come up with my own content or deliver one myself. So this ought to be a lot of fun.
Sure. So Dan, I think you might have heard a little bit of what John was kind of, sort of the background on the project from his point of view there. Maybe to kind of get started here, could you kind of help us understand, when you first, got your hands on that paper that came out, what were some of your first thoughts when you were going to take a strike at this?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is when you kind of look at it in the context of the time in which we're responding to this. I mean, we're in the middle of a global health crisis when all of a sudden, everybody is now telehealthing. I mean, whereas, before last March, this was still kind of a relatively new concept to a lot of folks, who are now probably, having most of their visits virtually. I think when we first saw that, first saw this come out on the street, it was very clear that the Coast Guard were looking for something that wasn't necessarily just a video visitation platform, right? Or the ability to do video visits, which would a lot of people immediately migrated to when all of a sudden they had to, see patients remotely. This was really more about how do they build a workflow around seeing patients virtually. And the two, they may seem synonymous in some senses, but they're actually very different when you consider healthcare workflow versus the workflow that you have for just doing a video visit. So it was really interesting to see that come out and, look at all the requirements that they had and then, put together the right solution that we could put together and meet their pretty aggressive timeline. So it was definitely like drinking from a fire hose,
10 days. 10
Yep.
days was the timeline. Now, on the Pexip side, we're providing a software platform, right? Kind of a build your own conferencing platform. But really, when I saw in the RFQ 10 days, I was like, let us know what you need from us, guys. It was going to be a challenge, and I really thought it was maybe nearly an impossible task. But a lot of people came together to make this happen, and that's what makes it a really excellent story.
Wow. So you're telling me that it was a 10-day turnaround from the time that the paper landed in your hands before you actually had to give a formal bid. Is that correct?
No, there was a contracting process, but I think I don't know, Dan, if the verbiage was 10 days from date of award, but it was something that had that sort of pucker factor involved. And just to kind of back up to let you know what we're talking about. The program itself is called Coast Guard Care Anywhere, and the goal here is to take anywhere from 150 to 200 healthcare professionals and put them in touch with around 2,000 patients on a daily basis. As I said earlier, Pexip is software. So the place they wanted to deploy this was AWS Government Cloud, Amazon Web Services Gov Cloud. And so, there's a lot of exciting things about that. But when somebody says 10 days, you're kind of scratching your head going, well, I hope we can make that happen.
Yeah, it's definitely not one of the things or one of the requirements you expect to hear come out of the government or expect to actually have anybody take you seriously when they say, hey, from the date of award, we need to deploy this within 10 days. That's something you might hear from like, type A law firm or something like that. But from the government, that's just kind of like, yeah, right, I'll believe that when I see it type of thing.
So, Dan, what was the rush? Why did they need to deploy it so quickly?
Well, I think it was really just the timing and the need. I mean, obviously, we're always looking at customers in the federal space that have a limited time to spend money, or at least they really only tend to spend money in the month of September. But then they have a certain period of time in which they need to deploy the services and actually use that. But I also think it was more more about actually the need to provide that service to the members. That was really, I mean, obviously last year and even this year, we're seeing that as a firm and hard requirement. And I think a lot of different organizations out there really struggled through the last year, or kind of were building the bridge as they were crossing it, if you will, when it came to deploying telehealth services. And I think so. Obviously 10 days was pretty aggressive, but when you factor in those two pieces, I think that's that's kind of what led to that.
What did their environment look like before this was deployed? How were they accomplishing all of their visits prior to the technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at an organization like that, I mean, obviously they're relying on a lot of outside services to provide healthcare coverage for their members and things of that nature. But obviously, you want to try to build your brand and build your, connect your built-in providers and your built-in patients together. So I think when you look at some of the other tools they had, it was probably relatively antiquated things around in-person visits, which weren't really an option as much anymore, or if there were virtual visits, types of phone calls or emails or something like that. So it was very much probably a catch as can. Whatever we can make work, we're going to make work. And then looking at this as that solution that's going to basically be the here all end all, and the one standard across the entire organization that they could use.
Interesting. So beyond the fact that they wanted to get this deployed in 10 days after purchasing the platform, what were some of the biggest challenges that you saw within the project, and how did you go about trying to solve those as you were kind of putting this together, Dan?
Yeah, I think we really looked at the architecture as is this something that could actually be delivered to the Coast Guard in the time zone or the timeline that they've allotted. Are we really going to be able to meet all the requirements that they have? I think when you look at the other piece of the puzzle, which we haven't really talked about, which is the workflow software that is brought in by one of our partners called VMed, that really starts to make a lot more sense of taking a video engine like Pexip and turning it into a telehealth workflow. I think I've been in the video industry for a long time. We've talked a lot about video-enabled workflow. That's kind of been the catchphrase that I think I've heard for probably the last 10 to 15 years. But when it actually comes to having the rubber meet the road, what does that look like? This isn't about taking an off-the-shelf, out-of-the-box experience that's really intended more for people meeting in huddle spaces or meeting together for business meetings. It's really about taking that healthcare workflow and enabling it with video. I think there was a lot of this was kind of a first integration for us involved with these companies, with Pexip, Ironbow, and VMed. So it was obviously there's the unknown or discovering what you don't know as you're going as well. So that's I kind of look at those as being the things that made you kind of kept you up at night, or from an engineering perspective, makes you want to go to work the next morning too, and come up with, okay, we've identified these problems. Now, how do we solve them? That's the more interesting part of the job.
What do you think were some of the most stringent requirements that the Coast Guard had when they were looking for a technology solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at the Coast Guard, I mean, obviously the Coast Guard now falls under the Department of Homeland Security, but a lot of their security requirements are similar to what you would find in the military environment. So, whether we're selling into the Coast Guard or selling into the DoD, there's a lot of folks who are from the cybersecurity team that have the same, mission, that have the same objectives. So, if you stop to consider some of the solutions that are on the market, there are a lot of solutions on the market for providing video visits or providing video calling, but not all of them are able to be deployed in such a way that can help the Coast Guard or help an agency like that meet the stringent security core requirements that they actually have from their boss and their boss's bosses and things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up, Dan. It's one thing to stand something up in 10 days. Cloud environments should make that easy, but when you do have, the internal security processes and paperwork, things like, accreditation boundary, risk management framework, I'm just throwing out any alphabet soup term that comes to my head so I can sound smart. But those types of things add another layer, and they can add serious delays. And when you're talking about such a short period of time, one delay can throw you off by a couple of weeks. And so, that was an added challenge.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I was going to actually throw in there as well, because this is sort of on topic there with what John just mentioned, is Dan, not only have you been in the video space for a long time, but you've been in the healthcare space for a long time, as well as the federal space for a long time. So it is just an absolute gauntlet of red tape, regulation, all that sort of stuff. So, how do you navigate that when they have requirements on both sides, kind of in both areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I've been with Ironbow for a number of years. Prior to this, I was working for OEMs, and this was the first foray into the partner or systems integrator community. And so Ironbow itself, we've got groups that work with Department of Defense, groups that work with civilian agencies, groups that work with commercial providers, and then another group that works with healthcare. And it was very interesting that we were well suited, I think, to move into the healthcare space after being able to run the gauntlet of some of the things that the DoD throws at you when they're looking to procure and deploy systems. I mean, healthcare is very similar. I mean, and you can appreciate why they have, some of the same requirements as they're dealing with patient information and things of that nature. So, they too take the security and privacy both as our paramount consideration. So, in some ways, it's about taking all those requirements, listing them out, and then identifying, where are we going to run into issues? Are there issues that we can solve from a technical perspective? Are there issues we have to solve from a business perspective? Are there issues we have to solve from an institutional perspective? And then there's also the one that is always there. It's the political, the political layer as well that we have to navigate as well. So, the good thing is we've got a number of really, great folks on our team that have been in this space for a long time, and we can bounce ideas off of each other. We've got a lot of experience with past customers that we can all kind of bring together and then figure out, okay, what's the right way for this particular customer? We can take, lessons learned from previous customers, regardless of what area they're in, and then, combine that all into a winning proposal for the Coast Guard in this case.
Right. And one other thing that I kind of wanted to ask on that as well. So I'm getting away from the Coast Guard project, I guess, now, just kind of asking for sort of your personal point of view here. Within the last, let's say, 12 to 15 months or so, how have you seen telehealth change kind of in that time? I mean, obviously, I think we all know kind of what's been going on there. Curious from your point of view, how you've seen that shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is just awareness. I mean, I found it interesting that last April or May, you would see people being interviewed on TV who felt like they were the first ones that had just invented telehealth, right? It was like all of a sudden they just discovered this. I'm like, no, this has been going on for quite some time. You're just now, becoming aware of it. But I think I think that being said, it's really kind of opened people's eyes to the value. Also, obviously the need was there before they saw the value. But I think, when you looked at I guess it was last March, when the federal government came out and kind of relaxed some of the requirements that had been in place around telehealth, just so we could actually, meet with patients and things of that nature, that really changed the game. So much of telehealth for the longest time has been around what can we bill for? What can providers bill for? What can they bill the insurance companies for? And so that tends to be one of those things. I mean, I hate to say it, but from a pragmatic perspective, money kind of makes the world go around. And if we have the right technology, we have the right use case, but if there's no way to actually bill for that, or if there's nobody that's actually able to measure the ROI, telehealth is just kind of one of those. Yeah, we'll look at that when we get to it, or we're going to really need it. And I think we really kind of hit the point where everybody realized they really needed it last year. So I'd say that was the biggest thing. It's interesting to see now, almost 12 months, 13 months later, that you're now starting to see a lot of those customers who pulled the trigger on something just to get through the short term, now go back and start looking at, okay, what do we need to do long term? We know that some of the restrictions and regulations that were relaxed may not always be relaxed. And some of the things that we were allowed to do in the time of the pandemic and the time of the crisis, we may not be allowed to do that. And heck, there might even be things we don't really want to be doing because they expose us in certain areas. So we're starting to see a lot of people kind of start to, okay, now that we've gotten through the initial crunch and we've realized what we kind of need, now let's go back and look at, see what we should be implementing versus what we had to implement.
Yeah, what is our comprehensive telehealth plan? And because a lot of these organizations have been able to maybe use in a piecemeal fashion different types of solutions, they have a set of expectations, and that's what's great for those of us that have been in the video conferencing world for a long time. We can tout certain features, but if the customer doesn't come in with a set of expectations and maybe some sort of vision as to how they want to use the technology, features can be meaningless at sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the other thing that I'm seeing is maybe this renewed effort to really try to reach everybody, to connect with patients that maybe don't have access to large amounts of bandwidth, that aren't necessarily tech savvy. So they want the ability for these platforms to be usable on all devices, maybe even without, maybe with just a browser in some cases. And, talking about the Coast Guard opportunity, the requirement there was for mobile devices, Android and Apple, and PC as well, or to just be able to join via browser. So I'm seeing a lot more folks really focused on that as they try to spec out a telehealth solution.
Yeah, I was just going to add something that was interesting. Where there were a lot of hospital systems and practices out there that were employing telemedicine for one use case or another. And one of the interesting things we saw were how many of them then ended up trying to bend that very specific purpose built for a single use case technology or platform into satisfying other use cases. Some with success, some with limited success. So I think you're starting to see people, customers open their eyes to the art of the possible, the realm of what can be done with the technology, what can be done with telehealth, and start to dig a little bit deeper into it. I see a number of customers that are multi-vendor telehealth solutions. They've got one use case that's being driven by a single vendor, and then two other use cases that have two completely different vendors. And so there's this this challenge that they have of trying to make these work together if they need to work together, or they have to then add multiple people to multiple full-time employees to manage these different platforms as well. So it's there's definitely still interesting opportunities in front of us now that the awareness has been raised, I think.
Right. No, that's really. Yep. Sorry, Justin. Go ahead.
That's okay, Kyle. I was going to say, I think that oftentimes as industry professionals, we're always super close to the problem that we're trying to solve. I think sometimes it's important to kind of take a step back from that and also think about it from the end user's perspective and how they're consuming telehealth and what their feelings are on that. Have you received any feedback from people that have, taken advantage of telehealth, and what's that been like?
It's interesting because I get a little bit of both sides. I mean, people know that I've been doing this for a number of years. I think about my family specifically, right? My mother was an interesting one because she'd not done a lot of telehealth before this last year, but one of the local hospital systems, they had telehealth that was built into their patient portal and things of that nature. And she had a heck of a time trying to get that get the necessary application installed on her on her computer to join that virtual visit. Obviously, it was not a Pexip, it was not a Pexip designed workflow or anything like that. And then, she's really struggling through it. And then eventually she gets another email from the provider that's completely outside of the, completely outside of the normal workflow. And it's basically a web link to click on to take her to a completely separate platform that they'd stood up as a backup for the people that were having challenges with the primary one. So I think, I think even though that being said, my mom still had a great experience and she still liked the ability to do that, that encounter via telehealth because it, kept her safe and kept her at home. But at the same time, I don't think she quite appreciated the amount of friction that had been created for her to get through that virtual visit just because they were using a more of an antiquated approach. Well, simultaneously, they'd already deployed a backup that they were employing. So, it's interesting to hear from the people who had never experienced this before. It's like, completely greenfield, conversations that you have that you weren't having before with users because, I live in Northern Virginia. I before last year, I had not encountered a lot of people that had actually ever used telehealth because it was primarily focused on, rural areas or, niche type of use cases that nobody was doing. So.
Yeah, it's crazy how the world's evolved. Probably 2 years or so ago, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer at 50. She was 50 at the time. Fortunately, she's been in remission for a year, but as she now is doing follow-up visits pretty frequently at the hospital, they've employed telehealth for a lot of her checkups.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice because where I'm from in Westchester, we're about 45 minutes to an hour outside the city, and my mom works full time. She works two jobs, and she also has some anxiety when it comes to driving on the highways. So pretty much during her last visit, her last hands-on visit with her oncologist, she went in and they helped her download the app on her phone and taught her how to use it and launch a call. And all the subsequent visits beyond that have been telehealth. She gets on a call for 15 minutes with her doctor and they go over everything. She can zoom in on whatever the doctor might need to see at the time. And then that's it. That's the end of the appointment. Whereas before, she would have had to take a half day off of work and drive into the city. And then there's all this anxiety because what if it's during rush hour, or what if it's nighttime and I can't see so well? So for her experience, I mean, telehealth's been really a blessing because it's totally changed what her experience is like with her oncologist. And she's been raving about it pretty much ever since.
That's awesome.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So maybe at this point, this is a good chance actually for us to segue on the experience for the actual Coast Guard as well, that kind of Justin was just talking about there. Now, Dan, you did mention that, you did use multiple platforms basically to sort of set this up. And I mean, obviously with, Pexip kind of being that video engine sort of piece of it. But can you walk us through the relationship with VMed and kind of, how that was used here?
Yeah, so VMed is a company that builds a very configurable workflow tool, so you can essentially configure healthcare workflows, not necessarily just for video visits and telehealth, but all sorts of workflows, whether it's store and forward or basically just following up with patients and things like that. But it's very powerful in that we can create these different web-based workflows. Again, it's also a service that's based in AWS. And we can create a very unique workflow for the patient where they can, click in and say they need to have a visit with a provider. They suspect they may have COVID-19 symptoms. It walks them through a variety of different questions just to validate their temperature. They can input their temperature and things of that nature. They can identify whether they're a healthcare provider, which would then prioritize them for certain, within a certain community and things like that. And at the end of it, they're basically left with the option to, take the next available visit, or to go in and, say, here are some times that I'm available and here's the provider that I'd like to see. And they click that link and it goes into the Coast Guard, system. They've not done a video visit with anybody at that point, but it goes into a scheduler who can then set them up with a physician that they can see remotely. At which point they're going to, at some point they're both going to get a link that they would, click on to join the video visit. And obviously the Pexip experience ends up being a part of that web experience. So it doesn't require them to download any app. It's basically just happening right there in the browser for a relatively frictionless experience for them. There's obviously ways where they can, validate that their connection's good, check their microphone, check their camera, things of that nature. But the idea is to create that virtual visit in such a way that it follows the workflow. They get the necessary information that they need out of the patient in such a way that the scheduler can identify the right person and put them together. And then the two can, have the visit. And it still allows the provider to, if you've ever looked at, if you've ever been in a doctor's visit, that half of the time the doctor's talking to you, the other half is clicking away on a keyboard and documenting stuff into that electronic medical record, or the encounter notes that they're trying to keep track of. So all of this is basically designed to be, a workflow that is video enabled. It's, the video not being the primary thing, the workflow being the primary thing, and the video being the enabling technology to make that encounter possible.
Excellent. So in some ways, would it be fair to say that the VMed UI is sort of the one-stop shop for everything, for scheduling, for the visits, for everything that they need, and then Pexip underneath is really what powered all of that video that's sort of being shown in that UI?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So the VMed solution being the configurable workflow tool that we can customize to meet the very specific requirements of a particular customer. So we can repurpose a lot of the modules that are built into that, but then we can also create custom modules for specific customers. So when a customer like the Coast Guard wants to have their own disclaimer, that we can put into the workflow and now customize a workflow that we'd previously done for one customer specific to the Coast Guard, and including updating it with their logos, updating it with their branding, their colors, and things of that nature. So at the end, it doesn't look like a Pexip experience. It doesn't look like an Ironbow experience. It doesn't look like a VMed experience. It looks like a Coast Guard experience or the customer's experience, and that's really what we're trying to help enable. I think that's really about what telehealth is. I think going to become more about over the next few years are our customers and health systems realizing that it's a way to enhance their own brand with their patients, because I think there's a lot of competition in the healthcare space for patients, and healthcare providers really interested in making sure that they maintain the relationships or build their patient database so that they can continue to provide care for others as well.
Bravo, well said, sir. And shout out to the VMed folks if you're listening. We know you played a key role here, and I think Dan did a great job of laying out what VMed brought to the table. They were critical.
Absolutely critical. I think when we encountered VMed, and we've not been a partner with them for all that long, but I guess it's been within the last 10 months or so. It was really interesting because we'd lacked that type of solution in our tool belt. I mean, I think when you start looking at telehealth, there are so many people that are focused on trying to build all of that into the electronic medical record, which I think is great. Obviously, that's where the physicians and the nurses live. They want the patients to live there as well. But then you encounter a hospital system where they say, hey, we really want to integrate this in with our EMR. And you ask them, okay, which EMR do you have? Well, we've got about 22 of them across our entire system. Okay, so let's look at how we're going to get from where we are today to where you want to go in the future. And I think there's a lot of consolidation that has to happen. But the great thing about VMed is it allows us to do that integration with an electronic medical record if that's what the customer wants, or to have it as kind of a standalone, stand outside solution or stand alongside solution. So it's really kind of a powerful tool that allows us to be very flexible now when we start talking to customers about enabling them for digitizing healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. And so you kind of mentioned it earlier. I was always curious, actually. So the patient base for this, is this only for folks who are currently in the Coast Guard, or do former, members of the Coast Guard use the platform, or do you know? I'm just kind of curious.
I think it's primarily intended for Coast Guard, current Coast Guard employees, and folks like that. I actually think it's focused on Coast Guard members and not even necessarily their families. Again, I think that's the good possibility that could expand. I know that there's a whole lot of things that are moving in the world of providing care to our veterans, regardless of what branch of service, and trying to consolidate some of that as well. So some of this stuff is kind of in flux. But today, I think, and I could be wrong, I think it's primarily focused on the Coast Guard members themselves.
Excellent.
Not saying that it couldn't be opened up. Obviously, that's one of the powerful parts about the AWS, AWS service is it's essentially a service that lives outside of the Coast Guard environment. So it makes it so we could obviously, reach people wherever they are. But yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does actually, and being part of a project like this is so great, actually. I mean, like not only are you building a service, for something that's being used within the U.S. government, but there must be quite a lot there that makes you awfully proud, of what you do. So what I wanted to ask was, what from this project, made you the most proud? Actually, was there anything that happened that kind of stands out that you're just like, I'm really, really proud of X?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to just the ability to deploy it and stand it up as rapidly as we did. I mean, I think, when you think about last year and, just the state that we were in, the ability to get something done that quickly for the customer and get them up and running and get them using it. I think, that's the most exciting thing when you start seeing something that you envision, something that started out as a whiteboard is actually, making a difference in people's life. I mean, I think that's, I don't think that there's anything more cool than, waking up in the morning and knowing that you were part of that. I mean, that's kind of the thing that keeps us, keeps us wanting to go back to work to do stuff like that.
Great. And, John, what about you? So same question. What sort of made you the most proud from this project?
Well, to be honest with you, and as we said previously, when I read it, sometimes you get RFQs from, potential government customers, and you read through it and you think, well, okay, about 95% of this is possible, and 5% of that, I'm not sure if it's really possible. I read through a lot of stuff. I felt like it could come together, and I thought if it did, that it would be state of the art and really a fantastic application to say that, we were a part of this in the DoD and we were serving healthcare patients. It's satisfying. The use case, filling the use case is very satisfying. But then the way all these different technologies came together, when I first read through the RFQ and they talked about workflow, I'm like, I'm not really sure what is going to be used here. And then to see something like VMed and to see how nicely that fit together and how at the end state of the solution was excellent. I mean, all these different components, Pexip, VMed. I think it's awesome that it's deployed in AWS GovCloud. To see all that come together and have that solution be something that fits their needs the way they envisioned it, that is extremely satisfying.
Yeah, and I'll just add one other thing to that is, the component of one of the components of the solution is the scheduling piece. And one of the interesting things we found out after they just deployed it and started using it for a few weeks was that they'd actually started leveraging the scheduling capability for doing visits that were not video visits, right? So we started seeing this data that looked like, oh, we've got failed calls. No, they were actually scheduling calls using the scheduling tool that were, completely outside of video visitate or, the video visit. So it was just interesting for me and kind of, it's always fun to watch something that you help to create, be put in the hands of the users and then start to evolve beyond what it was originally, conceived to be. I think that's one of the most exciting things that I've, been a part of my entire career is helping to, create these solutions that then we hand over to the customer and they go, this is great. We could probably do this, this, and this with it. Whereas we had only identified, two things that we thought would be valuable. They identified an additional 3, 4, or 5, and I think that's just exciting to watch that happen.
So Dan, kind of piggybacking on that, and John, I'd also like to get your thoughts as well. Knowing that we have such a powerful technology platform behind us and thinking about all the great things that Iron Bow can do with the technology, what do you think the future of, doesn't even have to be telemedicine, just the future of video and the applications and the workflows that brings, what do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think I've been in this industry now since, 1997. I've been, tinkering around with video conferencing in various forms and in fashions. And it's always been fun to watch, the evolution. Like when I first got in the industry, I had to explain to people what it was. And then eventually I was able to say, well, it's kind of like Skype. And then eventually I was able to say it was kind of like things that they would recognize, right? And I think it's most interesting now when you start looking at people who are just used to this type of a medium, right? And that's where things get really interesting when all of a sudden this is no longer this kind of voodoo style magic that people are scared of. When people are actually comfortable with the idea of being on camera and doing video calling and things of that nature, I think that really opens up the possibility I think even more to just that wide term adoption and acceptance and things of that nature. I think I know that there are a lot of schools right now that are still doing virtual visits, and I was talking with some friends of mine, and they're having to go in and tell their kids, your teacher wants you to have your camera on, so make sure you turn your camera on. And they see like more than 60% of the 60 or 70 or even 80% of the students don't have their cameras turned on. But then you look at another school where they kind of mandated from the get-go, hey, you need to be on camera, and that's part of the requirement, and how people have just become comfortable with that, right? So driving through the adoption barrier and keeping going, I think is just kind of that's going to open up a lot more possibilities as to what this technology, I think, is going to bring to us. So.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with that as well. And I think as the younger generations start to emerge into the workforce, I think adoption of video is going to become much easier. My brother is 23, and he's totally adopted video. I mean, the way he and his friends communicate, it's FaceTime. They don't call each other for anything. If they have a 5-minute conversation, even if they're driving, probably, which is not super safe, but it's over FaceTime. And whether they're pointing the camera, up at the ceiling fan, or if they're talking to them face to face, it's just, that's the way that the younger generation wants to consume technology. That's just the way that they communicate. So I think adoption of video is going to be a lot easier over the next couple of years as those guys start to come into the workplace.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sort of the other end of that spectrum would be my mother, who I sent her an iPad, and somehow she managed to mess up the controls to the point to where even the icons, everything on the screen was zoomed in. Like, the icons were giant. So she shipped it back to me. I was trying to get this thing to where she could use FaceTime to talk to her grandkids. I fixed it, shipped it back to her. She messed it up again. And the statement she said to me about the iPad was, I wouldn't recommend these things to anyone. And I thought, well, you're a little late on that. They have millions of users. But, it is interesting to see video right now have its moment in the sun. As somebody who's been in the industry, Dan's been in a long time. I know tons of people in the industry. I got in the industry in 2000, and to see this kind of be front and center is really kind of amazing after all these years. The thing is that the video doesn't necessarily replace all interactions, and I don't think any video seller would tell you that. When I see the kids on the Zoom calls, I know that person-to-person contact is critical, and that they really need that. And, there's a different type of engagement in person, versus over video. It can serve a lot of purpose, but just like anything else, you kind of have to have balance. And, talking about the future, if you watch Star Wars and Vader talking to Palpatine, they've really got this holographic technology down. I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, holograms in the future.
I was one of the most intriguing technologies to me really didn't have to do with video conferencing that I saw, but this momentum for the platforms like YouTube and I think of Plex, I think of Netflix, and how they created this kind of watch together experience where you can basically from your house and their house watch the same movie together, right? And I'm like, well, that'd be just great as well if in a little picture up in the side or on my iPad, I'm like looking at them as well, so we can gauge each other's reactions and stuff like that. I mean, I thought that technology was just so cool because it was like, hey, we're getting together around this common thing that we can both do in our own house. But it's not like a meeting, right? There's so many things that we've turned into a meeting, if you will, like in some ways over the last year. But this was more around, okay, we have an activity going on that we're just enjoying something together. And I think those types of technologies will only get more better or more impressive and more immersive as we go. Obviously, some of them may. Some of those types of solutions may not be as interesting as we come out of the pandemic, but I just think it's kind of interesting to look at some of the innovation and because somebody said, hey, we should give this a shot. That's now a feature in a product that we can enjoy. So that's kind of where that's kind of what I look most forward to coming out of this, is some of those nifty ideas that have come up.
Definitely, and so as we kind of get towards the end here of our time, and this has been great fun, absolutely. Speaking of nifty ideas, what is the niftiest of thoughts that you had after this project with the Coast Guard? Like, what's your one big takeaway on this, Dan? And then we'll ask John the same question here.
Yeah, I think it's more that it's really that we can help customers build those solutions that allow them to do what they need to do to meet their mission, and do it in such a way that we're helping them build their brand and build their awareness with their subscriber base. I mean, as much as I would love to see Ironbow's name out there and Pexip's name out there and VMed's name out there, it's really rewarding to see a customer like the Coast Guard build that capability, and then build that awareness with their subscribers, and build that satisfaction for their users. I think that's just that I get really excited about that. I think that's just really a great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just think it's a cleanly engineered solution that does exactly what you want it to do, and it's state of the art. And frankly, as we said at the top of the show, with someone like the Coast Guard that serves multiple missions like this, to be able to enhance that mission and to be able to help them take care of their people, and just like I said, have a well-engineered solution, I think that's the most satisfying thing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And with that, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and wrap this first show. But again, Dan and John, thank you guys so much for being our first guests on this show. And we hope to have you both on again very, very soon.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Dan, John, it's absolute pleasure. I think our future podcast guests will have a high bar to try to compete with. I don't know that anybody would know without us telling them that they were dealing with 4 complete podcast rookies. So it was a great hour. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
Cheers, guys.
See you guys.